agentic will probably become the word of 2025 if it hasn't already.
Hello, I'm Neil Perkin, the host of Think with Google Firestarters, and Firestarters is, of course, a series of insightful conversations with the interested and interesting of the advertising, marketing, and innovation communities. And today on the podcast, we are going to be diving into the emergence of agentic AI or AI agents and what it's likely to mean for marketers and brand experience. And we are fortunate enough to have the brilliant Rohan Tambyrajah today with us to talk about that. So Rohan is the Worldwide Chief Experience Officer and EMEA Chief Strategy Officer at PhD. So Rohan, welcome to Firestarters. Can I begin by asking, what is your provocation, please, for the Firestarters audience?
Firstly, thanks so much for having me. It's an honour to be featured on Firestarters. So let's dive into the provocation. So my provocation is: marketing must evolve to meet the changing nature of brand experiences and unlock new opportunity in the era of agentic AI. So let me just unpack that a little bit before we get into the conversation, if that's okay, Neil. So when we talk about marketing evolving, really, I mean, at an organizational level, how marketing departments are structured, how their processes work, the types of talents they will need to bring into the organization to deal with some of these future forward capabilities, which are ultimately going to define marketing. When we talk about experience, we talk about the changing nature of how consumers are experiencing brands, which is becoming less advertising centric. And when we talk about agentic AI, we really want to get into what this new, emerging, interesting intersection is likely to look like as AI agents, that is, agents that are powered by AI that can start to act autonomously, is likely to have on how we produce, design, implement brands and marketing today, tomorrow, and into the future.
Yeah, wow. I mean, there's just so much interesting things to talk about there. So I'm just going to begin actually with a bit of context, because I know you've said before now, like the problem we're solving for, if you like, is fragmentation. So tell me a bit more about the context here for why all this is so important.
Yeah, so I think if you go back 10 years, the job of media planning was, I wouldn't say easy, but it presented you with quite a narrow set of choices. You had a narrow set of wide channels which reached large groups of audiences. And then you sort of fast forward to where we are now, and we've been hit by multiple waves of fragmentation, which have impacted multiple parts of the media consumption mix, but also the capability mix and the nature of how creativity and creative assets are produced. So let's just speak on that for a second. So if we were to first think about the reach of paid media alone, now paid media in its reach is diminishing because more and more consumer time is starting to go behind paywalls. Netflix, let's say, it's going into subscription-based services. It's emerging in virtual environments like gaming environments, where the dominant model of connection isn't advertising or paid-for media. That represents, we work out about a third of consumer time with content right now. You've got to look at the rise of the creator and influencer economy, which of course is underpinned by social, but kind of represents a kind of a new paradigm in how brands connect with consumers, which is now mediated by this new layer, an intermediary layer that we call the creator, and that's a very different model of connection. This and a number of other aspects of fragmentation in the audio visual landscape, fragmentation in social, right? Behavior moving out of the big three social platforms into this new long tail. But a stat yesterday that The average number of social accounts a consumer has is about 7.9. I counted myself, and I'm probably more like 17. Wow. As I have a Letterboxd account for films and a Goodreads account for books. Passion-based, community-orientated social platforms, and that's what we're having to manage now. This huge fragmentation of diversification of connection opportunities. The challenge this is placing on marketing departments and creative agencies and media agencies is it's forcing us to produce more and more and more. The volume of assets that marketing departments are producing increased by about 40 to 50% in the last 5 years alone, because there are new channels, new places, new spaces that creativity needs to manifest. And many of these, to my point earlier, don't take a traditional paid advertising shape. And there's a lot of pain that we see that's coming from feedback from marketing departments. And Gartner, as you'll probably know, do a CMO survey, and I think the number was 46% of marketers believe they are wasting resource in the silos that this new fragmentation is creating. So highly complex landscape, and that's very much a problem that marketing itself has to solve for. However, when you look at it from a consumer perspective, of course, people don't see the structure of our businesses, they don't see our job titles, and there's an expectation, overwhelmingly, for brands to be consistent, more consistent across these fragmented touch points. So there's a real tension there between fragmentation and us as marketing services entities having to manage that, versus an expectation from consumers for us to be more consistent. And that really is the core of the challenge as I see it when we think about brand experience. And when I say experience, I mean experience in the most holistic sense of everything a consumer experiences as part of brand communication, marketing, across an end-to-end journey.
So, yeah, I mean, it's so interesting you frame the challenge like that. I think, so pulling out of that, the kind of need for connection, so connecting up experiences across a hugely diverse range of different touch points and interactions, but also consistency. So, I mean, how do you think the modern marketing team, the modern CMO needs to structure to solve for that?
Yeah, it's a hard one, and being honest, I don't think anyone has cracked it right now. But I think there are probably 3 or 4 layers that marketing teams, CMOs, need to think about as foundations to help unlock this. The first is a data layer, and we've described this previously as intelligent infrastructure. And by that we mean getting to a well-structured, taxonomized and unified set of data that underpin all marketing activities. Right now, simply because of the way marketing departments are structured, you have data silos. So there'll be a team that are responsible maybe for UX and CRM that are sitting on a wealth of first-party data, but they don't connect effectively with the brand's marketing team, who really should be leveraging the power of that data. So having this unified data layer underpinning everything is kind of the first point on facilitating a more connected approach to experiences. Second layer on top of that is, if you have unified data, how do you then think about marketing capabilities and their connection across the marketing workflow? And this requires more of a platform-based approach, actually. And we're seeing some clients and a lot of holding companies, ourselves at Omnicom included, moving to platform-based solutions, which start to connect core capabilities like creative, content, commerce, media, within a single workflow. And that facilitates a much greater interplay between these capabilities, where they were previously siloed within holding companies. But it also allows these capabilities to build off those same singular unified data sets. So For example, at Omnicom, we've just acquired Flywheel, who are the largest commerce entity in the world, and now having that richness of commerce buyer behavioral data sitting at that bottom data and insight layer means we can put out really, really specific insights on how, where, why people are shopping on platforms like Amazon, elevate those insights and use them to inform creative ideas, right? And there are, really, I call them precision insights that are currently being under-leveraged because they sit within these very siloed teams, but have a use case and an application that could be far, far bigger than just optimizing some lower funnel commerce activity. So that connectivity is so fundamental in capabilities. And really, when we start to think about marketing orchestration, it requires that connected flow of capabilities across it. And then I think probably the third layer, if those capabilities are of course producing more connected marketing activities, campaigns, ideas, ensuring that you have the right machinery in place to measure the new value that these are creating. And I think there have been some interesting evolutions in kind of how and what we measure. I've really enjoyed that that there's been a resurgence in marketing mix modeling, MMM, sort of going back to some very traditional forms of regression analysis, but evolving these with some of the new tools, inputs, data points that we're getting from these new touch points. So we talk about a return on experience as being the kind of master measure, as a more singular view of the integrated performance of campaigns over the long and short, and set it up to capture some of those points of behavior which might not traditionally show up in a market mix model if we were running it, again, going back to that point, against a set of narrow but wide media channels. You really have to evolve the complexity of that multivariate regression analysis you do to isolate the contribution of marketing and its incrementality to the business.
I mean, it's return on experience is such an interesting way of augmenting the kind of digital kind of return on investment. But if I can take this now into the role of AI in all of this, because obviously we're on the cusp of some pretty significant change, I would say. And you did write a brilliant piece on brand experience in the agentic era. So basically the idea of AI agents and what that could mean for marketing. So I think the way you framed it was brand experience is going to be, it's not what you do, it's what you help people do, as a way to kind of frame this. So if we could just, as a way into this, can tell me a bit more about, first of all, how we should define AI agents, and then a bit more on where you see the kind of key role of AI agents in brand experience?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I will say this is nascent right now, and agentic will probably become the word of 2025 if it hasn't already. But I think unlike some of the other buzzwords that we got excited about, the metaverse, NFTs, Web3, this is likely to have an immediate and transformational impact on every aspect of the marketing stack and workflow. So what are AI agents and what are agentic models? So AI agents are different from ChatGPT, let's say, which is a conversational user interface, which acts as an assistant to you. You give it a prompt, it gives you an answer, and you can choose what to do with that answer. Agents take it a step further in that they act autonomously. Give you a good example, which is probably one of the first early articulations from Anthropic's Claude, using a feature called computer use. Where if I asked ChatGPT to help design me a website, it would give me a series of steps on what I needed to do. It might generate the code that I could use to then implement in Python to create that website. Now with agentic AI, you can prompt an agent to design a website, it will go through all of those steps. It will create the code, but it will execute that on your behalf. So it's automating the task and removing the user need to execute. So AI agents act autonomously on our behalf, pointed at certain tasks, and help us accomplish those tasks, with some human intervention, of course. And when you look at agentic AI, and right now its use cases are very narrow, but you'll start to see them become wider and wider. We will see agentic AI emerge as pointed at specific use cases across the marketing workflow. Conduct research on this particular category, leverage some of the research you have in your academic database, and then synthesize that into a clear set of actionable insights that I can take out and use to inform marketing planning, and prompt the agent to do that. And it would go away and spend some time. You don't get an immediate response. Spend some time, take over your browser often, and you would see it navigating its way around certain academic databases, prompting itself sometime to get answers, searching Google. So it's doing all of these things for you, right? So we'll have vertically integrated agents that are focused on specific tasks across the entirety of the marketing workflow. And then above that, we're likely to see orchestration agents. So vertical agents do the tasks, orchestration agents link the tasks together in a meaningful way. And that's going to have quite a profound impact, right? Because if you think about the marketing development process, you start with a brief, you unpack that brief, set of insights, get to a sharp strategy. That strategy informs a creative brief. The creative brief then creates a set of assets. Those assets then move into activation. You optimize your report. In theory, we could get agents to automate all of that, and that raises some quite fundamental, maybe philosophical questions around the role of what we do right now in marketing teams. But I think interesting questions, and certainly from my perspective, I look at this with a great deal of optimism, as I think it creates opportunities for us to push into spaces that historically we have not had the means to do so, because we have been weighed down by laborious, quite repetitive tasks which have drained significant resource across marketing departments, across agencies, and beyond.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting, because that context you gave at the beginning about the fragmentation and that being a real challenge. So do you see really that sort of combination of vertical AI agents focus on specific tasks combined with AI agents which can orchestrate horizontally, perhaps around personas or particular kind of scenarios? Is that really a way in which marketers can actually solve for that collaboration and consistency problem in brand experience, do you think?
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head there, which is wave of fragmentation, and now what is happening is we're moving into another era of consolidation, where the interface for all of the information that consumers are now having to access across these multitude of different touch points is increasingly going to be started to integrate it into single point interfaces that are AI driven, right? And the provocation here is that AI becomes the new UI, and
right.
I've been playing around a lot with some of the kind of early betas of some of these agents. So Anthropic a couple of weeks ago at Davos introduced Collaborator, which is their agent. OpenAI 3 weeks ago introduced Operator, which is their agent. Google have a project called Project Mariner, and these are all pertaining towards the same thing, largely browser-based automation, but actually the bulk of what we are doing in marketing services happens within a browser. So you're just allowing these agents to take control of your browser and navigate everything within it. So I would say, and one of the examples is I got it to book me a holiday. and
Right.
painful process booking a holiday. Calibrating flights, going through price comparison sites, finding a hotel with the specific criteria you need. It's laborious. I remember Firestarters saying there was something like 47 separate stages on the travel planning journey, right? So a lot of weight, cognitive weight on the consumer, and that is a high involvement but low enjoyment task. And what I would say is, in that quadrant of high involvement, low enjoyment tasks, renewing insurance, redoing your mortgage, very painful. Having an agentic AI jump in and actually sit as the UI over all of that. So it can go to TripAdvisor, find out all the reviews. It can go to Expedia, find the best hotels, go to British Airways, find the best price flight, and then just provide me with an aggregated set of options and an option to then, do you want a quick buy on this, is probably where it's likely to go. And there's another interesting provocation which only came to mind the other day, actually, which is, if this layer emerges over browser-based activities, which are, of course, all designed around the graphical user interface, the GUI, which is point and click or tap and swipe, do you even need graphical user interfaces, or do you just need an API for all of these things that's going to feed in, and you're going to let the AI automate big parts of this?
Wow.
And I'm not saying that the AI will automate everything, because there are certain things we won't want it to automate. But I certainly think there will be tasks which, like I say, are kind of high involvement or low enjoyment, or low involvement and low enjoyment, that we would just want to outsource to an entity that can do it on our behalf, right? And I really want to think about reordering my toilet roll, or repeating my Sainsbury's order. I would quite like that to be automated to some degree, and I would just like it to prompt me at certain stages of its process for feedback and direction. What Ethan Mollick, who's a great authority on AI, describes as the human in the loop principle.
Yes.
You let these things automate, but there need to be points of human intervention. So you stay in the loop, feeding back, allowing it to iterate based on your feedback, rather than letting it just go off and do its thing and come back with something that might be irrelevant.
And it feels as though, this idea of having an agent autonomously work out the best way to achieve an outcome. So it feels that it's really important to be specific about the outcomes and goals that you're setting agents. So that's a very human thing of what you want to do and how you want to achieve it. But the AI agent can then run away and sort of automate that process. But it strikes me that this is useful for marketers potentially, because they can give a marketing objective as an outcome, and the AI agent can then automate or can then go through the process to deliver that outcome. But also, as you say there, for consumers and for consumer experience, right? So the idea of just being able to book a holiday or something, if it knows me well enough, that it can then actually automate a process to book a holiday which I'm going to really like and enjoy. And so it strikes me here that actually we've got benefits for marketers and potentially for consumers, but the key thing here is that the brand is kind of like the in the middle, I suppose, of that, right? So I think you wrote here about how the brand persona becomes the differentiator here. If brands are going to actually start to be a lot more active at helping people, customers, to achieve things, then the persona that the brand has is all important. So tell me a bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right in that agents will live on both sides of that supply-demand equation, and marketers will have agents automating things for them, but consumers will use their own agents as well. And agent to agent marketing is probably a new discipline that's going to emerge in the next year. How does my agent inform a consumer's agent? If a consumer's agent is aggregating all of this stuff, like what are the levers I pull to influence that agent? Which isn't too dissimilar, I think, from where we were with SEO. which is we were trying to work out what the parameters and variables were to influence Google's algorithm, which listed out its search results, which used to be called PageRank. Principally, I think it's the same thing. People are now starting to talk about GEO rather than SEO, generative engine optimization. So this kind of agent to agent piece is quite important. But as you say, the role of brands as a consequence of this changes somewhat. And I would see the role of brands becoming less functional in their nature, as actually an agentic AI would probably be better at assessing and attributing value to the various functional attributes of a product that perhaps you would have to previously. But I see this as an opportunity as more and more of these kind of lower end tasks are automated, more and more resource is freed up. And the things that don't get automated actually become elevated as part of that. And that, to your point, Neil, changes the roles that brands play. And brands, as they move from communication to conversation, and as the primary interface for some of these new services becomes AI, as AI becomes the UI, you've then got to ask yourself a new set of questions, which probably those in brand design weren't asking themselves previously. If you think about what a deck on brand design would look like, you'd have classic brand architecture. This is our brand personality. This is the traits thereof. It'd be a static PowerPoint slide, which would then be interpreted in multiple ways by multiple agencies. And that persona bit now becomes a living entity, because if I'm having a dialogue with a representative of the brand that is an AI agent, you then get into questions of, okay, well, how does this person relate to me? What's its tone of voice? This is effectively a new spokesperson for the brand, and might start to become my primary interface. So, a provocation that comes off this is, if we're starting to automate some of the functional transactions, actually all brands become service brands to some degree, because they're creating these persistence layers through these agents, which are there to interact with on a more ongoing basis, and starts to look at the points of value creation that sit not just in product delivery, but pre and post that. And that for me is quite an interesting space, because it really starts to change the nature of brand interaction and brand experience. So how that pans out is going to be quite interesting over the next few years. So there's this notion of a low latency LLM. So these are sophisticated graphical large language models, which are represented by characters or avatars, which are hyper realistic, that you can have real-time conversations with. And as we start to see more of these work their way into, the very early examples of this are in customer service, right? But it's going to get richer and richer and richer. And I think this disrupts the model of kind of advertising being the dominant means of building marketing effectiveness.
Yeah, it's quite mind-boggling, isn't it, really? But it's just one thing that struck me actually is, if you think about now in this kind of agentic world, that the brand differentiation or advantage is going to come from personality, but also the unique data which the brand or the agent can be trained on as well, which can actually create advantage for the brand, I guess. It struck me that sort of the whole idea of this sort of markets are conversations, we used to say like years ago, when in the first days of social media, it's like
Who Trained Manifesto. Well, I think that's
exactly right. And suddenly we are actually, this is now becoming a reality, or actually will become a reality, I should say. So I wanted to ask as well about what this means for strategy, right? Because one of the other interesting things that you say in what you've written about this before is about simulation as strategy. So rather than building marketing strategy, CMOs building marketing simulations. Tell me a bit more about that.
Yeah, so I mean, strategy is an exercise in defining future states. Ultimately, that is there are many ways of defining strategy, but strategy is a future state. Is ultimately what we're trying to articulate through the strategic process. And of course, we've done that in a very linear way. What we now have the opportunity to do with AI agents, but also another set of quite interesting innovations in technology, specifically a piece of technology called digital twinning. So digital twinning is a way of creating a statistical, then visual manifestation of a market, or actually where it's being used most powerfully is in large scale industry. So you have people like Siemens creating what they call industrial metaverses. So they build these digital twins of factories, and so it's industrial metaverse, as I say. And graphically, you go in and you put a new machine into a factory, and then the statistical model underneath it then starts to calibrate what the impact of that new machine is going to be on productivity, on the quality of product output. It's running all of these predictive analytics to predict what the future impact of this will be. There's a really interesting company called Dassault Systems who are building digital twins for parts of the human anatomy. So they've built digital twins for hearts, for example.
Wow.
If you think about how your data is logged in the NHS, kind of sparse, rough write-up from a doctor that gets passed on to another doctor. Actually, where we'll move to is if you've had a heart operation, you have a digital twin of your heart built out, this virtual entity underpinned by statistics, and effectively you can simulate different types of operations on that, and it will assess the impacts on the individual as a consequence of that, right? And so the provocation there is, well, we should be using that to create simulations of markets, and then testing the impact of different variables on future outcomes. So rather than writing a long strategy deck which says we think we'll get to there, you build a simulation and say, actually, I'm going to test 3 different shifts in variables, moving to a new brand platform, shifting my channel mix to X, running it through this digital twin model, which could be, let's say if we would take a specific example, if we were doing it in store, and we're looking at a digital twin of what's happening on shelf, like, right, okay, I'm going to change some of the distinctive assets within the brand. I'm going to downweight my trade spend, so my prominence on shelf is going to go down, and I'm changing the appeal of the product to be more focused towards younger generations rather than the core buyers. Put that into the simulation, and it's going to run, based on this digital twin, a modeling exercise which starts to outline the impacts of the potential of these variables, right? So strategy will be less a linear process of doing your 4 C's or 5 C's analysis, getting to a thought, and more still doing that, but then intersecting this with this model, which is going to say, well, actually, if we do X, Y, and Z, it will deliver you this. If we do A, B, and C, it will deliver you this. So it will allow us to test the impact of strategy in a simulation of a real world with acuity, which we haven't had the means to previously.
It's just absolutely fascinating, isn't it? The potential of that. So we're running short on time, unfortunately, but just got a couple more questions. So one is about how we assess and evaluate effectiveness, I suppose, in that environment.
Mm.
Because it strikes me that what we're measuring, it just we need to have quite a fundamental shift in that. I think you talked before a bit about collective outcomes and not just commercial outcomes. So tell me a bit more about what effectiveness means in that environment.
Yeah, so I guess it goes back to the role of brands, and if we're saying brands are working with agents, brands are creating agents, a lot more is being automated. The role of brands is really starting to move towards a space where a consumer has a goal, and the brand's role is in facilitating and influencing and aiding the consumer to get to that goal. And those goals are going to be non-commercial goals, right? So it's not just about selling product, net sales value. That is, of course, part of it. But I think we need to look at this through a slightly different lens, as what can a brand help an individual accomplish? And that might become a new criteria of measurement. So what have we helped you accomplish through the widening of this brand as a set of services rather than necessarily a set of products, which are designed around consumer needs and pointed towards facilitating, aiding, influence the process that gets a consumer to a goal. So what do you measure off the back of that? So it might be something, just to go back to my travel booking example, like the metric for me as an individual might be time saved off the back of that. And that becomes a way that we show benefit to consumers, and we show benefit to ourselves, because actually we've just cut out 30 hours, and me tabbing between Expedia, Booking.com, Viagogo, trying to calibrate the flights, game the algorithms, because they are of course game to get the cheapest flight. So time saved might be one, amount of cash saved might be another, combined with commercial effectiveness. And hypothesis would be that we will start to find correlations between these consumer benefits in helping them achieve their goals and brand equity, right? So if I'm a brand that helps you, Neil, save time in renewing your insurance, that's going to have a really, really positive impact on the equity of that brand, because people will see that brand as a partner and a co-collaborator in helping them achieve their goals. And that's very different from where we are right now, which is, you go through the classic Kantar meaningfully different salient framework, which is a set of brand attributes which we need to land through different communication vehicles. This shifts us away from that. I'm not saying we move away from that, but I think it's that and optimizing towards consumer goals and finding new ways to measure them, and finding correlations between those new measures, and then commercial effectiveness, and ideally up to the highest order metric, which would be shareholder value.
Yeah, I mean, what you said there about how traditional kind of ways of thinking about brands and evaluating the value brands are still relevant, but then you've got this whole other layer on top of it, which is just a totally different way of thinking about brand experience. Absolutely fascinating. So I've got one more question, if I may, Rohan, which is, I guess, a way to kind of bring it back to the present day, and just think about, if you're a CMO now and you're managing brands, and where would you start with this? What do you need to be thinking about now in order to prepare for this kind of future?
Yeah, so it's probably best to think about it in two buckets: personally and organizationally. And I think on a personal level, all CMOs should be themselves and engaging their teams to experiment, right? We're in an era of experimentation, and the more teams can understand the true and emerging potential of these new tools, capabilities, services, the better you'll be set up for the future. And it's a shift in an organizational mindset, and that needs to be engendered as part of the cultural codes of marketing organizations. Then when we look at it from an organizational perspective, I think ultimately most marketing organizations are going to become owner operators of their own large language models, right? They're not going to be outsourcing this to GPT. They're not going to be putting it into an Anthropic Claude, because there are all sorts of privacy issues that come with that. You know, how much of your data is being used to train the model, and therefore how much of it gets diffused publicly, et cetera, et cetera. So how do you lay the foundations to a future where you will be bringing more of this capability in-house? I would work out what are the differentiators that you have that can make a large language model or another form of AI, like a diffusion model, which creates images, proprietary to you. So doing some work with a luxury brand recently, and said, right, you've got this huge archive of the history of your founder, which is not publicly available. Train it on that, get all of that codified digitally, train it on that. And right there, you have the perfect source for brand differentiation, because all of the history and the heritage is based into that. So you have effectively what's called a custom context window that you're training off. So start to work out what the differentiators in inputs to the large language model can be that can make your AI uniquely an AI for you. And then start to think about, map out across your workflow where you think the potential use cases and benefits could be. And it's probably useful to think about this in 3 layers. Is it going to make my marketing more efficient? I.e., is it going to save time and then allow me to redeploy resource to areas which are more business critical? Is it going to make my organization more effective? Is it going to be used to elevate the commercial effectiveness of what we produce as a marketing department? Or thirdly, is it going to make us more inventive? Is this going to be a way of thinking about how a new collaboration between humans and AI can ultimately create the new? Because there is a lot of new here, and you know, the thing that excites me most is thinking back to, you know, various shifts in technology. With every shift in technology comes new genres of creativity, comes new roles. And, you know, that is something to be incredibly optimistic about, right? Because the most powerful force in history, you know, it's not AI, it's human ingenuity. And I think what this gives us is liberation from these mundane, repetitive tasks, so we can focus on the ingenious and, you know, work with a new tool set to come up with things that we probably can't imagine right now, you know. But that is my really optimistic view about where we will go next. And yeah, I hope that's exciting for the industry at large, and is embraced with that spirit rather than the slightly dampened spirit of it's a cost-saving opportunity.
Yeah, no, that is such a great way to wrap up the discussion, Rohan. Thank you. And I love the sort of positivity of that. It's clear we're on the cusp of some pretty big change, and what that means for brand experience in particular. So so my thanks to Rohan. Thank you so much for coming on Firestarters. That was absolutely fascinating. And if you enjoyed that episode, please don't forget to subscribe, of course, and to share. But my thanks again to Rohan. Thank you for coming on.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.